is losing his marbles. It's really sad. But it happens. Well, he's losing the capacity to read context, and I can understand that completely. It's a part of communication to be able to understand context or to understand the importance of communication. It's like talking to your child and they're just completely unaware of what it is they're trying to say. He's getting to that stage, and it's a result of the I've never really understood what the difference is between Alzheimer's and dementia, but maybe I should look it up and research it. But I think people would say that of and I'm going to publish this to YouTube. This is my stepfather. He's going through this right now, dementia. My father went through it too. Both of them went through it. My father went through it, and he's going through it. And it's the deterioration. At least this is as far as what I can determine of it. It's the deterioration of your capacity to be cognizant of context and all the things that your brain permits you to do. And eventually, it takes everything that you are, and then it kills you somehow. It is the breaking down, I guess, of your neurons, all the connection and all the things that they control, because your brain controls not only the things that your thought, it also controls all your motor functions. So you can imagine all that breaking down, all the services that you rely upon being there for you, breaking down. That could kill you. That could lead to death, and that's dementia, I guess, or as Alzheimer's. It's a disease. It'll eventually kill you. So I may not fully understand that, because I have a tendency not to go to Wikipedia, because as I was telling somebody else, I want to give them the glee and the satisfaction of knowing that there are people in the universe that prefer to be ignorant to some degree, just to show their pretentious inner workings. You know, to be ignorant to the point of being cute, not to be fully to not be well read, or not to be smart, because in this day and age anybody can be smart as long as they can access Google. And the funny thing is, it doesn't seem that the access to Google and Wikipedia has had any effect on people's ability to better their intellect. So I guess I'm just blending in. And I know I'd come across as pretentious, but it's just an attempt to be definite. Um, it's an attempt to use the Lex correctly. I am not efficient with Lex. I'm not efficient with context. I'm really not efficient with culture, and I understand that. Even if people might think that I am, or that I even think that I am, I know that I have to offer myself the benefit of being stupid, because if you don't offer yourself the benefit of being stupid, the alternate is to be grandiose and sense of self-worth, which is an attribute of psychopathy, which I think which most psychopaths don't actually pursue being intellectual. It is not in their pursuit. They pursue the vanity of being intellectual, of being acceptable, of being um, able to the point of self-interest, and not to actually be of value. And it's because of how their brains work. It has nothing to do with their they have incapacity to do such. Is that they're bored to death of those things that they can see are not going to benefit them as much as their ability to manipulate people and to work their ways up into the upper echelons of management of corporations, into money and politics, which is where they shine. Um, but shine in a very infamous way on some who would demonify them. You have to bestow your empathy and your understanding to somehow be able to see into the keyhole of what a psychopath thinks, because it will give you the capacity to bend over and see it from their perspective, and then maybe somehow to communicate and and somehow communicate ideas that would give them an incentive to meet us halfway, us the empaths. If I could give relevance to themselves, even though they have no capacity to identify with anybody but themselves. They don't even have the capacity. A good bit of them don't even have the capacity to identify that there is a God that created everything. Because in a psychopath's world, since they can only identify with themselves, not even with other psychopaths, they are the God of their universe, because they only identify with themselves. Just as this character that I talk about that people think is mythological and I don't believe is, that Satan is such a character. That Satan is so self-absorbed and can only identify with Satan that Satan has no capacity to identify with God, or to even understand that God, at least in the very beginning, that Satan didn't understand that God had a character outside of Satan's perception. God was holding back quite a lot of God's capacity to do things in the world, to give, I guess, Satan the capacity to be able to identify with God, and it never and I guess he just didn't reciprocate, and as a result, he ended up being rebellious, just as any teenager is rebellious to their parents. But teenage rebellion is usually a result of trying to communicate to their parents that they're not clones of their parents. It's the beginnings of trying to develop individuality. And it's the individuality and the need for specialness that ruins most communes, and is the reason probably that the first church was a commune. That they may have received preachings by Paul in places like Corinth. And I just lost my train of thought because I'm starting to fall asleep. But I always like it a little bit whenever I fall asleep and I start becoming incomprehensible, because it's kind of like being able to enter the dream world and attempting to be cognizant. It gives people the glee and entertainment value that somebody falling asleep might bring in being incomprehensible and stupid, because people will laugh at stupidity. It's the basis of really bad comics, to try to make that 10% of the audience to laugh knowing the full audience is embarrassed and drunk. But there is a style of comedy. There's actually a venue for comedians that are good comedians called Dry Bar, and they don't permit comedians. They don't permit people in their venues to drink. And the reason for that is so that the comedy appeals to their cognition and not to their embarrassment. I experienced the perfect storm of bad comedians when I was in New York City. I joined Match.com to seek out females that I might have a relationship with and later marry. And as you know, Match.com sets up events for people to come together. Now, if you consider the culture and the context of that community, women will not show up at these events drunk to avoid being taken advantage of. So there was not a drunk person in this comedy club, this event that they had set up. Not one drunk person. Nobody had any relationships to each other. And if you think about what bad comics prey upon, it's relationships and embarrassment. It didn't work. It was the perfect storm. These guys were sweating on stage because they could not get a laugh. Nothing they had was amusing to this audience because nobody was drunk. Everybody was normal. The only thing that could make them laugh is a good comedian who is a philosopher that has figured out a way to make money. A philosophy student that's figured out a way to make money, which is exactly that sort of person that Bill Murray is. That's the reason why he's so effective, is that he understands philosophy. And in philosophy, you have to understand cultures and you have to understand worldviews. You have to understand what would make the audience laugh by understanding from their perspective their own culture, and what makes such laugh is the tension of trying to communicate their morals to the rest of the world and failing. So a philosophy major like Bill Murray would come into being with the desire to understand other people, which is the basis of Christianity, is to understand God and to understand that God has a need to you to understand other people so that we might produce the beginnings of heaven here on earth, and that is the need for others. Because hell is the exact opposite, the need to destroy others, which you see in the rumor mill, the tabloids, which it's the bad press. It is the need for people to find fault in others so as to elevate themselves. And so the comedian that preys upon embarrassment in relationships are effectively putting down the audience and making it laugh at itself in a very harmful way that they're all going to forget the next day because they were all drunk. That makes the comic on stage money. Gives him the idea that he's actually getting somewhere in his life when he isn't. That his foolishness is not really offering a great benefit. He'll eventually realize that he is missing something, and what he's missing is philosophy, which will make him a better comic. But these guys were tag teaming the audience and trying to just get a laugh. It was the perfect storm. It was the greatest ass kicking the culture could give to a bad comic. It was the ultimate ass kicking. It was the ultimate discipline. It was the slap on the wrist to say you don't do this shit to people who are not drunk. And anybody who's ever visited such comedy events to listen to some of the really terrible shit that these guys throw at the people, that preys upon the same sort of things that cliques do when they excommunicate a person desiring to be in their clique or to be with them. The person who's desiring to be with or in the clique is bestowing upon that clique the importance of heaven, but the clique is unwilling to give it back, which is the identity of psychopathy, grandiose sense of self-worth, the ability to poo-poo the rest of the world, the identity of the Pharisees that Jesus rebuked. So I'm going to cut it here, and I'm going to start playing this game, because if I don't, it's going to kick me out.